Bodybuilding is one of the most important factors behind becoming a successful wrestler, and I'm gonna tell you why, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com. If this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming an explosive freak, you want to learn how to become a better athlete, you want to become a stronger wrestler, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So a lot of wrestling coaches will sit there and say like, well, that team's got a lot of good bodybuilders on them, but how effective are they on the mat? Or I've even heard some coaches say, well, yeah, Ohio State, they're really good at building bodybuilders, but are they really good at building wrestlers? I do believe they're pretty good at building wrestlers, but they're not just building bodybuilders. What we gotta do now is sit there and say, what is bodybuilding, right? Bodybuilding is enhancing and improving our musculature through resistance training while utilizing sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Some of this also goes through myofibrillar hypertrophy, but typically bodybuilding itself, when we think about the classic sport, when we think about Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jay Cutler, Kai Green, all of these complete animals, we think about it through the lens of doing long duration sets, very high reps, and just getting absolutely huge. But when we're talking about the sport of wrestling, we're talking about bodybuilding in a slightly different light. It's similar to the way that the Chinese weightlifting team utilizes bodybuilding movements for their Olympic weightlifting. Now, clearly, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Kai Green would not be the best Olympic weightlifters. They would be the best bodybuilders. But there's facets that we can take from their sport, from their realm, and utilize it to help improve our realm. And what we're talking about in our realm is wrestling. And so when we analyze wrestling as a sport, some of those key elements are we've got to have really good grip strength. We've got to have really good strength endurance. We have to have really good relative strength. We have to be extremely explosive. So now that we can take that understanding and say, all right, bodybuilding for wrestling is not going to be this all or nothing thing. Doesn't mean that we're going to be complete bodybuilders. We're walking around looking exactly like Kurt Angle when we step out on the mat. But instead, it means utilizing different aspects from the sport of bodybuilding to improve those key elements on the mat. So we're gonna go into those key factors and how bodybuilding for wrestling can dramatically improve your competitive performance. Right off the bat, some of the hardest things I have ever done in my entire life are based around wrestling, swimming practice, and bodybuilding, okay? So I've never trained solely as a bodybuilder. But when we talk about that, when we talk about swimming, wrestling, bodybuilding, that brings to light the mentality. Wrestlers are hard-nosed. They're very tough individuals. Think about Habib. Think about all those kids running around Dagestan. Those kids are machines. Think about Jordan Burroughs. He's a machine. Cael Sanderson, Dan Gable, John Smith, the greatest American wrestler of all time. Now we're starting to think about these guys who are mentally tough. So where does bodybuilding come into play? If you utilize some aspects of bodybuilding, you will notice immediately the mentality transfers over very, very well. If you've ever done a true session of bodybuilding, you've likely thrown up or realized it is extremely difficult. There is very long sets, lots of time under tension, and just serious amounts of discomfort, extreme amounts of discomfort. I've done sets on a leg press, and I wouldn't recommend leg pressing for wrestling, but I've done sets where we might do 30 reps on the leg press, take off 100 pounds, do another set of 30, then take off 100 pounds, and then do assisted sets of 30, so much so that your quads are just shaking like crazy. And this can transfer over really, really well to that mentality. When you're under stress for long periods of time, when you're in discomfort for a long period of time, you get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that is what differentiates champions from runners up. The champion is comfortable in discomfort, whereas everybody else struggles to get into that zone. And that's one of those key factors that bodybuilding brings to the wrestling realm. That next key is going to be strength endurance. Like we mentioned, when we're talking about wrestling training, we know you have to be explosive. We know that you have to have really high levels of relative strength, and if you're a heavyweight, really high levels of absolute strength. So you have to train the Olympic lifts or plyometrics or big time strength movements. You've got to do back squats. You've got to do bench presses. We've got to remember, this is not an all or nothing. We're just utilizing parts of bodybuilding to improve what we're doing on the mat. And so when we're talking about strength endurance, now we start to do things. Let's hammer curls for a set of 30. Let's do a set of dips for 20 to 30 reps. Rest for 30 seconds and then do 2 rope climbs, rest for 30 seconds and get back on the dips. This could be an example of utilizing long duration sets. This could be an example of utilizing principles from bodybuilding, but that's going to create strength endurance, especially late in the match. That's when we need endurance. We need our strength to be at this level while our opponents are at this level. If we are here, we are comfortable in discomfort, and we can bring out a large amount of power output while still fatigued, because we have that mentality. We have that physical strength endurance because of how we utilize bodybuilding to improve our wrestling. So strength endurance is one of those big keys that bodybuilding brings over to the mat. Another key factor is intimidation. We see guys that are just these hulking figures, and I can share a story. I trained a wrestler named Pete Renda. Okay, Pete was a Pennsylvania state champ. He got 3rd at the Division I NCAA tournament for NC State. He's an animal. When we were in high school, we did quite a bit of bodybuilding work towards the end of his workouts. And all the time he would step out on the mat, he would start to warm up, and you could hear groans. You could hear his opponents saying to their coaches, I don't want to wrestle him. Look at how big he is. Look at how big his forearms are. Look how big his traps are. And these are things that go a long way. It's intimidating. You start to see someone warming up, they take off their shirt, you see their shoulders, you see their triceps, their biceps, you see their forearms are just massive. They look like someone who's a bricklayer. They're just walking around with these huge hulking forearms like Popeye, and you don't want to get on the mat with them. Think about someone like Brock Lesnar. The myth and the aura around Brock Lesnar was the fact that he was an enormous specimen. He wasn't the best technical wrestler. That's not why people were intimidated by him. That's not what made him the freak show that he was. What made him that was his size and his actual build as a physical athlete. And that's where we can utilize some of those factors for stepping onto the mat. You start to get into your opponent's head, and then you lock up with them and they feel the power, they feel the strength that you've been working on, and then late in the match, they're even more intimidated because they realize they can't hang with that strength endurance that you have. Now, before we go into those 2 key factors that are going to fully unite what bodybuilding does entirely for wrestlers, we've built an entire program around bodybuilding for wrestling. So we've put together a program and how our wrestlers actually utilize different strength movements, and then how they utilize bodybuilding to help with their mat strength. So if you click on the link down below, you can pick up our Bodybuilding for Wrestling program, and you can see exactly how you can utilize bodybuilding to improve your strength and performance on the mat. Now, finally, there's 2 key factors here. Bodybuilding in long sets, long time under tension, can dramatically improve the strength of slower twitch muscles. So slower twitch muscle fibers respond really well to longer periods of time under tension. And here comes in mat strength. We can think about, what is mat strength? I've always defined mat strength as the ability to take your strength into the weight room and then utilize it effectively on the mat. And it comes down to a lot of applied grip, those advanced grip exercises. So here's the big kicker. Your biceps, your lats, your forearms, these are all muscle groups that tend to be slower twitch. So we're still going to train them with explosive based work, but we're also going to target a lot of these slower twitch muscles with very high reps. We want to target our biceps, our forearms. Think about farmer's carries or hangs off of a fat bar, or long sets of curls with fat grips on our dumbbells. So these are all little tricks that we can utilize to train those slower twitch muscles and have it carry over directly to that match strength. And so we have to see the athletic performance enhancement from bodybuilding for wrestling. We have to be able to see, okay, our sports performance, our wrestling performance is going to dramatically improve because our slower twitch muscles are actually stronger and they have more strength endurance. And that's the key areas in wrestling: our grip, our biceps, our lats. Think about pulling on someone's head here. Think about getting wrist control. If I have wrist control, it's my bicep, it's my lat squeezing here, and it's my grip here. Those are key factors. Think about a wrestler who would do, 100 yards of walking with farmer's carries with 110 pound dumbbells. And then right after that, they've got to do pull-ups to failure. Those are bodybuilding modalities that transfer really, really well over to the wrestling world. And so when we hear wrestling coaches say, oh, bodybuilders aren't going to be good wrestlers, we have to realize that bodybuilding for wrestling doesn't mean we're training to be bodybuilders and we just happen to wrestle. Instead, we're taking a couple key factors out of the bodybuilding realm so that we can train mentality, we can get that strength endurance, we can intimidate our opponents mentally, and finally, we can train those slower twitch muscle fibers and we can dramatically improve our match strength. So if you want help with a program that's going to help you utilize bodybuilding for wrestling, you can click on the link down below. You can pick up our Bodybuilding for Wrestling program today. If you want more information about wrestling-based training, you can click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.